Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro Podcast, a business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. My name's Jerry. I'm your host. I'm a former chiropractor. I help chiropractors now with websites and local SEO. I help new chiropractors get started, and I help stuck chiropractors get unstuck, and I host this little podcast. Today, we are going to talk about a marketing budget, and we're going to answer the question, if you're a chiropractor, what should your marketing budget be? Is there an exact answer? Is there an exact percentage? What are some of the things that you should be thinking about when you're deciding about how much money to spend on marketing? We're going to unpack all that on this episode. Now, before I get too far into that, I do want to remind you guys, if you want a better chiropractic website that's focused on new patients that helps your practice grow, go to Rocket Chiro and check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. If you are a current website client of mine, or you are not a website client of mine, but you would like some help with local SEO, getting ranking higher within the Google Maps and getting more patients from Google search, then reach out to me for that. I'd love to help you there. We've been getting some really great results with some of our clients lately with local search. If you're brand new or you're feeling stuck, check out my Next Step program. It's a great way to go beyond the podcast, get some additional information, and get access to me and get started or unstuck, whatever your situation happens to be. All of that can be found at rocketchiro.com. All right, so let's I wasn't exactly 100% sure where to start with this when it comes to a marketing budget for chiropractors, but I think that a good starting point might be to talk about what is normal for a lot of small businesses relative to chiropractors. And in a typical setting, you're going to see a lot of small businesses are going to spend about 5 to 10% of their gross revenue on marketing. Now, marketing is sort of a broad, sweeping term. Some chiropractors get a lot of pride in they don't spend money on marketing, but even something like having a website, you have to pay for hosting. You have to, unless you have some sort of really strange arrangement, even paying for your URL, like paying for print materials, paying for cards, all of that stuff is technically marketing. So the idea that you don't pay any money on marketing is probably not an accurate assessment. I think people that say that they're proud of the fact they don't spend any money on marketing, they're probably saying they don't spend any money on external marketing. It's probably the fair way to say that. But in general, if we just throw marketing into a bucket, the average small business is going to spend about 5 to 10% on marketing. And what you're going to see is businesses in a growth phase that are attempting to do more, get more, grow more. They're not coasting. They're not established. You're going to see numbers more like 10 to 20%. That number actually goes up. In the chiropractic world, you typically see numbers more like 2 and 3%, or in some cases, as far as external marketing goes, you see 0%. Like chiropractors are not spending any money on marketing. And as a general rule, chiropractors don't spend as much money on marketing as other small businesses. They definitely don't spend as much money on marketing as a dentist or a lawyer. I kind of jokingly said, but it's not really a joke. I've said for a long time I would make more money if I didn't work with chiropractors. And pretty much everyone I know who works with chiropractors will say the same thing. And the only people that don't say that are people from the outside in who are sort of picking chiropractors as a good niche or good group to work with. If you've actually worked with chiropractors, you know that they tend to not have deep pockets. And even when they do pay for services, something like local SEO, where I may charge someone $400, $500, $600 a month, if that same service was done for a lawyer, I could probably charge $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and they wouldn't bat an eye about it. So deeper pockets, more willingness to pay. You'll see that typically outside of the chiropractic profession. Chiropractors in general don't usually have huge marketing budgets, which is even why when a practice is doing really, really well, it's not uncommon to see a chiropractic practice that has a very low percentage of their overall gross revenue that's going toward marketing. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that it is a thing. So I don't necessarily think that you have to have a 10%, 20% marketing budget in order to grow as a chiropractor. And actually, I would say probably pretty certainly that you don't have to, because it would be very unusual to see a chiropractor that's doing that. Now, here's the kick in the pants about all of this for chiropractors, and that is, if you're in the beginning and you're in that growth phase and you could benefit from having more money, more marketing, more push, more outreach because you really, really need it. Like you're trying to get your head above water. That's generally the space where you have the least amount of money available to you and you have the least amount of experience making marketing decisions and deciding what's good and what's not, evaluating return on investment. And you're more likely to waste money and you're less likely to have money. And then you flip that around when you get further along in your career where your practice is more stable. And now it's like you have more referrals, you're more known in your community, you have more practice momentum. That's the point where you tend to also have more money. And ideally, you have a little bit more wisdom. You're making better choices, better decisions. You sort of recognize what sounds fishy and what doesn't. But then at that point, you actually don't need to spend as much money then on marketing as you probably did in the beginning. So it's really an awful situation I think a lot of chiropractors find themselves in. Now, I will say this from personal experience is I don't think that having a ton of money available to you when you aren't making good choices and you don't know what to do with it, I don't know that that's the best thing. And I say that from personal experience. Like when I got out of school, I always had really good credit. Like I took really good care of my credit. And when I got out of school, it was a time where banks were still giving loans to chiropractors, and my credit score and my history and the stuff that I had that I had kind of had done up to that point that put me in a good position. Those things made it easy for me to get a loan. And I ended up getting a $100,000 loan when I started my first practice. Now, in hindsight, I do appreciate that I got that. And I appreciate I got it because it contributed to the build out and it contributed to me being able to keep my head above water while I started figuring things out. But if I'm being honest, having that money available, there was a level of complacency and there was a level of security that I had that I probably shouldn't have had. It probably would have been better for me to have less money, not that I wouldn't have taken a loan out, but taken less money out and been more aware of my situation sooner, as opposed to allowing that to go longer before I finally asked for help and admitted that I was in a situation that I wasn't really prepared for. And so in that sense, me having that big loan, I think probably allowed me to be sloppier for longer. And I think that happens a lot with chiropractors. And if you're in a situation where maybe you have some money saved up, maybe you come from money, like your parents, your family, whatever, like you have money available to you, or you get a big loan, there can be some dishonesty with yourself with how well you're going to do or how much help you need or what you should or shouldn't be doing. And then also the flip side of that is when you are not making great decisions, or maybe you don't have the leadership chops or the wisdom that you're going to have in the future, you might just start throwing money at stuff and just start saying yes to a bunch of things you shouldn't be saying yes to because you have that money available to you. So it's just sort of a bad situation. And in a perfect world, you know more, you're more wise, you make better choices, and you have money available to you. When you tend to get to that point, you probably have enough practice momentum that you don't need to be spending huge amounts of money on marketing. So it's kind of crazy. So what are things that chiropractors should consider when they're talking about their budget? Because here's sort of the answer to the question, what should my marketing budget be? The answer is there isn't a specific percentage that you should be shooting for. There just isn't. It really depends on what your practice goals are, and it depends on what your practice situation is. It depends on what your own personal skills are and what your opportunities are. There's a lot of factors that go into it. I don't think the goal should be to spend no money just for the sake of doing it. I don't believe that there's anything like noble about that. It doesn't make you a better chiropractor. It doesn't mean that you've arrived and others haven't. There are very successful chiropractors that spend a lot of money on marketing because most of their patients come from external outreach and they don't have a lot of referrals and they don't necessarily have a lot of retention. So they have a lot of new patient influx that comes in all the time. And that's essentially how their business has grown. There's other practices that spend very, very little money on external marketing, and they have a very good practice because everybody's coming from referrals and from reviews and from reputation and from stuff that just doesn't cost as much once it's up and going. So I don't think there's a right or wrong. I do think that if you know what direction you want to go, that influences the decisions you make that will hopefully let you be where you want to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So what are things you should consider? You should consider your budget. Don't spend money you don't have on things you don't need. And also don't spend money, don't gamble with future patients. And what I mean by that is sometimes what you tell yourself is, I know I don't have the money to spend on that higher dollar thing. Now, I'm not saying you never have to take risks as a chiropractor. Sometimes you do. But there are times where there's a big, flashy, shiny thing that's presented to you. Like, we're going to help you get, it's a home run. It's the 20 new patients, the 30 new patients, the 40 new patients a month. All you have to do is, it's that thing. And that thing's presented to you, and you want to get out of your situation so bad, and you want to make progress so badly that you say to yourself, if I just get 2 or 3 new patients from this a month, I can break even. And essentially what you're doing in those situations is you're gambling with future patients. You don't take your last dollars, or you don't invest money you don't even have in the hope that it's going to work out, because a lot of marketing doesn't work out. Like, some of the things you think is going to work really well just doesn't. And some of the things you don't think is all that important or interesting turns out to be foundational for your success. It's sort of one of the other many, many frustrations with running a small business. And so just be honest about your budget. If you don't have a lot of money, then focus on the things that don't require a lot of money. Now, the flip side of it is time. Like, you don't generally get stuff that doesn't cost a lot and doesn't take time. It usually does one or the other. If you're in a situation where you don't have a lot of money, you're going to have to invest some time. And the things that, and sometimes that time, what is required is time and skill, like time and knowledge. Those things are both required to do something well. Like, a website is a good example of that. I do websites for chiropractors. Somebody will pay me $150 a month to do their website. Well, you're like, hey, I could self-host and I could just do my own website, and it's only going to cost me, $30 a month or $25 a month or $50 a month, whatever your hosting is. And you're like, well, I could just do it myself. You absolutely can. There's no reason you can't. It's going to take you the time to set it up. And there's a certain amount of knowledge and know-how that goes into setting it up in a way that it's actually benefiting you. And so if you're willing to do that, if you want to do that, if you're happy to do that, and you would rather do that than spend the money, or you just don't have the money. People do reach out to me sometimes and they're like, I really, really want this. I want help with this. I want help with that. And I talk to them and I go, it's just not the right time. And sometimes I talk myself out of business and talk myself out of money, which is, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't do that. I'd like my business to grow, but I don't want it to grow at the expense of someone else. I want to be in situations where my clients are winning and I'm winning and everybody's happy. Like, that's what I want. I want to be in equal exchange with my clients. I don't want it to be a situation where they're telling me their situation and I go, yeah, I could get this person to spend money on this thing, but it's probably not the best thing for them right now. And so I think that one of the things you have to consider when you're deciding your marketing budget is you just have to be honest about how much money you have, how much is a wise risk to take, and how much is just a not right now. It doesn't mean you can't have the fancy shiny thing. It doesn't mean that that's not going to be a part of your practice, but maybe it's sort of like your dream car. It's like if your dream car is a Ferrari and then you're fresh out of school and you don't have Ferrari money, like going and gambling your future on the hopes that you could pay for a Ferrari and then maybe for some, you could finagle your way into one, but then you can't afford it. You can't afford the maintenance. You can't drive it. You can't insure it. You can't do, like, that's not how that's supposed to be done. Like, maybe you need to go buy a Honda. Like, maybe you need to go buy a Kia and drive that for a little while and then get the Ferrari later. And so marketing is the same way, like business is the same way, like chiropractic is the same way, and even buying equipment is the same way. Just be honest about your budget and don't take unnecessary risks, especially if you have a family, which is probably a different discussion. You have to consider time. How much time do you have available? Generally, the longer you're in practice, you have more money and less time. That's sort of how that flips when you've been in practice, which is why generally when people are in practice longer, they start bringing people in to help them do things that are going to save them time. So a chiropractor that's been in practice for a while that has a good established practice is less likely to want to do their own website than a chiropractor who is fresh started. That's just sort of how that is, because it's time. It's not anything else, just time. What's your opportunity? Like, what's available and what makes sense? If you have the opportunity to do social media, or you have the opportunity to get out in your community and do some things, then you should do those things. If they're within budget and it makes sense, it's cheap, you have the time, like that sort of thing. If you have the opportunity to spend $12,000 on some sort of marketing thing, but it doesn't fit your budget, then don't do it. So you kind of have to balance all of these things: time, budget, what's your opportunity. And you could really, really love a particular type of marketing. Like even podcasting is a good example. Like there are chiropractors that love the idea of podcasting, or they want a podcast. So I can tell you from experience, like podcasting is not a local advertising thing. Now there are ways you can make it more local, but you're going to have listeners way further away from your office than what would be reasonable to drive to your office. And so you may love podcasting. You may have the time to podcast. You may have the skill to podcast, but is that the opportunity that's going to take you where the direction you want to go? If you're trying to grow a local practice where people have to actually drive to your practice, like, is that the best opportunity that you have? The answer is probably no. That it doesn't mean you can't podcast. It doesn't mean you shouldn't podcast later, or once your practice is more established, you could do that. Like, it's perfectly fine. Like, I'm not telling you not to podcast. I'm just saying that you have to make these decisions within the context of what is your goal and what are you trying to do right now. And that last thing you want to ask, or at least consider when you're making these decisions, is how much practice momentum do I have? You could say you want to have a referral-based practice, but if you have no patients currently and you have no patients in the past because you're just getting started, you can't rely on having a referral-based practice. You could say, like, I want to get a bunch of patients from, networking, but if you don't know anybody in your community and you have no momentum in that direction, you can't lean on that and rely on that now. You can start taking steps in that direction, so that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you're where you want to be, but you can't lean on that now. And that's the important thing when you're making the decision on how much money, how much time, like where do I invest in marketing, is looking at your time frame, looking at how much time you have available, looking at what your goals are, looking at your situation, just being honest about it. Because being dishonest about it, we live in a world where it's like, if you say, I don't feel well, there are people that are like, oh, don't manifest that. It's like, knock it off. If you don't feel well, you don't feel well. I understand that your words matter and your thought process matters. Like, I understand all of that. But saying things that aren't true, or pretending that things are not true just because you're afraid of manifesting it, that's dumb. If you're broke, you're broke. And it's appropriate to make decisions that are not like rich people decisions when you're not rich. Like, that's appropriate. Like, it's foolish to act otherwise because you're trying to manifest something that's dumb. And people that say otherwise are just being foolish. They're being ridiculous. So let's talk a little bit about the time and money trade-off. And I've kind of talked about this already. What I would say is this. I'll kind of get back to one of my original points, which I don't think that not spending any money on marketing should be the goal. I do think that you can make a goal of spending very little time on marketing. I would say very little, because I don't think you should ever be so hands off that you have no idea what's going on. Like, you shouldn't just pay people and check out. Like, that's not wise. Even with your staff, like, you can train them, trust them, but you also need to check in. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just check out. That puts yourself in a very vulnerable, bad situation. So I do think that one of the really good goals for most chiropractors should be, I want to eventually get to the place where I'm not spending a bunch of time doing marketing. And that could be that maybe I'm doing my website now, but I'm going to have Jerry do it later. I want to get some more people from Google, so I'm going to pay someone to help me with local SEO, or I'm going to pay someone to help me with Google Ads. I want to get more patients from social media. And here's one of those things also that I don't think you can completely check out from. If you want to do well on social media, you're going to have to create your own content. Like, I don't know any other way around that. There's like creating canned content and paying these people to like manage your social media is pretty much a waste of money, because if they're just going to put out generic content doesn't move the needle. People aren't interested in generic content. People don't follow generic content. People don't go to a chiropractor because they have really cool generic content. They connect with the chiropractor because they're creating unique content for that particular chiropractor. They're creating their own stuff. And so, if you guys were, I put out the memes and I do these podcasts and stuff like that, and it sort of gives you a view into my personality, and you get to know me a little bit. And most of my clients that reach out to me have heard my podcast, and they kind of feel like they know me and like that sort of thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, and I'm not saying I'm the perfect person to follow. Like, I'm not a social media guy. I'm not a big deal in chiropractic. I've been doing this a long time with chiropractors, and I'm still like, there's one out of every 100 chiropractors knows who I am. It's like, it's not. So in terms of popularity and social media cloud and all that stuff, listen, I'm no good at it. But I can tell you this. I do know from many, many chiropractors that I've worked with and many people that know much better than I do, you can't do social media without spending some time on it and creating your own custom content. With that said, you could take a video and send it to somebody else and let them edit it and post it. You could create some content and do the simplest, easiest thing on your part and then pass it off to somebody else. And I think that those are good goals. And I think that's a good way to spend money, especially the deeper you get into practice, then the more practice momentum you have, is just start saying, what are things that need to be done? What are things that are difficult for me? What are things that are important, but my time is better spent doing something else? Spend money on those things. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to continue to do everything yourself, because when you have a little bit of momentum and a little bit of money. So we'll kind of talk about this. I'll wrap this up here real quick. How do we decide where to spend money, what to do? I think you just have to take into consideration, start with your goals. Are you doing short-term marketing, long-term marketing? Are you doing a little bit of both? I'm a fan of doing both, but like things like networking and SEO are a little bit more long-term. Things like Google ads, even social media ads, those can be a little bit more short-term. And so if you need people right now, go out and shake some babies and kiss some hands, or kiss some babies and shake some hands. Go out and meet some people face to face. That's probably the quickest way to get people into your practice. So long-term, short-term, just understand what you're doing when you're, deciding where to spend money and where to spend your time. Look at your available resources. Don't put yourself financially in a bind. Don't overcommit yourself time-wise. Where can you spend less time? Those are good questions to ask. What are you good at? What can be outsourced? Other people are good at things that you just don't need to be doing. So you can be a chiropractor, let other people do other things if you have the money to do that. I think you should start with foundational stuff. So I think your website, SEO, Google profile, reviews, and networking within your community, I consider those foundational. I would also throw social media in there for those of you who want to do social media. Now, I hesitate to say all chiropractors' social media is a foundational piece of your marketing, because if you're not going to do your own content and you're just going to post generic stuff, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just wouldn't pay someone to do it, and I wouldn't expect much from social media. But if you're wanting to get more from social media, you want to get a lot from social media, then I think that can be a foundational piece. A lot of chiropractors, their whole practice is really built around social media. I would look at something like Google ads, things like billboards, radio, things like paid advertisement, print stuff, things like that. I would look at that as non-foundational things that are sponsorship, stuff like that. There are things that you could spend money on that are not essential. I would start with the essential things. Get those going well: website, SEO, Google business profile, reviews, outreach, social media. Those are foundational things. So final thoughts. Start with your goal in mind. Be realistic about where you're at. Smart chiropractors are going to measure return on investment more so than percentage of money that they spend or don't spend. It's all about return on investment. Is the money you spend or the time you spend worth the money you're spending and the time you're spending in terms of heading in the direction you want to go? It's return on investment. Make a plan, be intentional, be consistent, and be realistic. And don't compare your budget or any other stats for that matter to another chiropractor out of context. Chiropractors, I don't know how it is anymore. Like, I don't hang out with a lot of chiropractors in groups anymore. I used to with like seminars and stuff like that. There's always this percentage of chiropractors that wanted to talk about their stats. Like, how many patients do you see? How much money do you make? Like, how much you do? And all that stuff out of context means nothing. Like, it really does mean nothing. I became acutely aware of this when I was talking to one of my buddies he had 2 or 3 doctors that worked for him. He had a much bigger practice and a much bigger everything than I ever had in practice. Like, I was a one doc and a couple staff people office. I did not have a big practice. Like, I didn't have a big, like, it was like 1,300 square feet. It was not it was never a monstrosity. It was never something that would be necessarily impressive on the outside. And my buddy had the impressive thing. And I remember sitting down and talking to him one time, and I've said this on the podcast many, many times. I've kind of told this story without saying who he is. And we started actually talking about numbers, which I don't usually do. Like I don't think numbers out of context matter. But he started telling me how much money he had to spend to get, like, pay his docs, pay his overhead, everything else. And although he was probably grossing 3 or 4 times a month what I was, I think he was bringing home about $3,000 to $5,000 a month more than me. And I remember thinking, like, what a hassle. like the amount of stress that he was under, and the bigness of it, and the hoops he had to jump through, and the amount of money he had to make every month to break even, and all of that stuff. I remember thinking, like, I don't think you got it better. Like, I know like, in the end, he did net more money than I did, which is fine, but I was doing fine, and an extra $3,000 to $5,000 a month wasn't really going to make a difference, and it wasn't probably worth me, like, going to an early grave over that level of stress. So, and people lie, which I'm not saying he lied, because he's my friend and we were just having a private conversation, but chiropractors lie all the time. So don't listen to what other chiropractors say about how much money they spend on marketing or any of their stats in general and believe that any of that is true. We used to say all the time, me and one of my best friends would say all the time, that whatever a chiropractor tells you, like, the degree to which they are eagerly sharing stats is also the degree to which they're lying to you. Like, it's just, maybe it's not that way anymore, but it used to be pervasive within chiropractic that if somebody was spouting off stats, they were just a bag of lies. They just, don't do that. I have other things to say about that, but I won't. That's a tangent. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. If you know a chiropractor who doesn't listen to the podcast, and there are a lot of them because this isn't a big deal, share the podcast with them. I'd really appreciate that. If you want help with your website and local SEO, reach out to me through Rocket Chiro. If you feel stuck or you're getting started, check out my Next Step program. I'll talk to you guys on the next episode. See ya.